Pam thought she was walking into another debate. She could dominate, until Jasmine slid a piece of paper across the table that flipped the entire conversation and the country on its head. The lights burned steady above the set, humming just loud enough to remind everyone how close they were to being exposed. 3 cameras pointed inward, lenses trained on the 2 women sitting opposite each other at the narrow panel desk. Jasmine Crockett sat poised, pen in hand, a small folder tucked neatly at her side. Pam Bondi, in a bright blazer and sharp heels, leaned back in her chair like she already knew how this would end. The moderator gave the usual preamble: national broadcast, important discussion on election integrity and political ethics, but nobody was really listening. The real conversation wasn't going to happen with the questions. It was going to happen between the answers. Pam offered a practiced smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes, while Jasmine gave a small nod, polite but unreadable. The first few exchanges were controlled. Headlines, polling data, safe ground. Pam spoke with the confidence of someone used to hearing her own voice fill a room. Jasmine listened carefully, letting the words settle before responding with precision, not volume. From the jump, the energy was uneven, tilting toward Pam's eagerness to dominate the air. She interrupted lightly, corrected the moderator once, dropped statistics without context, but with absolute certainty. Jasmine stayed quiet longer than most expected, jotting the occasional note, her patience reading not as passivity, but as calculation. There was a weight to her silence, the kind that didn't come from nerves, but from knowing exactly when to move and when to wait. Pam, mistaking it for uncertainty, leaned harder into her space, unaware she was stepping into a trap that had already been set. The producer behind the scenes shifted in his seat. Something was off. Something was about to snap, but not the way Pam thought. Jasmine smiled slightly, almost too slightly to notice, and uncapped her pen with a soft, deliberate click. She was ready. She had been ready since the moment she agreed to this panel, and when she moved, it wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. Pam Bondi wasted no time making herself the center of the broadcast. She cut into every question, spoke twice as long as her allotted time, and layered her answers with so many, as a former prosecutor references, it almost felt scripted. She smiled when she interrupted, tossed in quick glances at the moderator like she was the one running the show. The audience, small, live, hand-picked, laughed once or twice at her jokes, but it sounded more polite than genuine. Jasmine Crockett sat through it all, still as stone, the folder on her lap untouched. Pam's real tactic wasn't the words, it was the framing. Every time Jasmine spoke, Pam would lean back, tilt her head, and deliver a tight little smile that screamed, "Look how emotional she's getting." It didn't matter that Jasmine's voice was steady, measured, professional. Pam treated her like she was seconds away from losing control. It was subtle but deliberate, and it wasn't new. Pam had built a career playing that game, dismissing arguments she couldn't win on merit by pretending the other side was overreacting. Today was no different, at least not yet. When Jasmine finally did respond, carefully unpacking a point about voter suppression with layered data and real-world examples, Pam jumped in mid-sentence. "See, that's the problem," she said, grinning wide enough to show teeth, always playing the victim card instead of dealing with facts. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. The moderator tried to move to the next question, but Pam pushed again. "People are tired of emotional politicians," she added, this time not even looking at Jasmine, like she was already past her. Jasmine blinked once, slowly, and set her pen down on the desk with a soft click. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She just waited. Pam didn't notice, or maybe she thought she had already won. The energy in the room tilted again, just slightly. Not enough to crash yet, but enough that everyone who was paying attention could feel it, the first crack in the performance. The tension wasn't coming from Jasmine's words. It was coming from her refusal to play the part Pam was trying to script for her. And if Pam thought she had control now, she was about to learn what it really felt like when the ground shifted beneath her. Pam kept circling, testing the edges of the conversation like a shark. She interrupted again, pivoted the topic again, swung the same tired accusations in slightly different wording. Jasmine didn't flinch. She nodded politely when the moderator redirected questions her way, answered with precision, and moved right past the bait like it wasn't even there. But anyone who knew how to watch a room could see it. Jasmine wasn't ignoring it. She was gathering it, like a slow, steady pull of rope through her hands, letting Pam tie her own knots without realizing it. At one point, Pam dropped a lazy jab about freshman politicians who don't understand the real world of law, and the moderator winced, ready to intervene. Jasmine just smiled, soft and dangerous. She picked up her pen again, twirled it once between her fingers, and set it down deliberately. "I'm happy to stick to the facts today," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "But just in case things get personal, I did come prepared." She tapped the folder gently once, not loud enough to be aggressive, but loud enough that every person on set heard it. Pam chuckled under her breath, like she thought Jasmine was bluffing. The moderator gave a tight smile and moved on to the next question, visibly relieved. But the panel wasn't resetting. The undercurrent had shifted. Pam was still talking more, still pushing harder, but it didn't feel like dominance anymore. It felt like desperation trying to mask itself as swagger. Jasmine stayed still, her hands folded neatly on the table, her eyes never leaving Pam's face. She wasn't trying to win the moment. She was waiting for Pam to lose it. And when the moment came, Jasmine wouldn't have to yell. She'd barely even have to move. It happened fast, but not so fast that you couldn't see it coming if you were really watching. Pam leaned in, cut across the moderator's question, and tossed out a line she'd probably been saving. "You know, Congresswoman," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "some of us actually had real careers before we got famous for yelling on social media. It wasn't clever, it wasn't even subtle, but it was designed to do one thing, make Jasmine look small in front of millions of viewers." The moderator stiffened, glanced sideways like he wanted to intervene but didn't quite have the spine. Pam smiled wide, like she knew she could get away with it. A few people in the audience laughed, quick and awkward. Jasmine didn't react right away. She let the air stretch thin between them, let Pam sit in the ugliness of what she just said. Then, without rushing, without a flicker of anger, Jasmine leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows lightly on the desk. "Since we're talking facts," she said, voice low, steady, slicing clean through the room, "let's actually show some." Her hand moved calmly to the folder she'd been guarding since the segment began. No dramatic flourish, no raised voice, just a simple, surgical movement as she slid the folder across the desk toward the moderator. Pam blinked, just once, the smile faltering at the edges of her mouth. The moderator reached for the folder like it might burn him. The whole room seemed to pull tighter, breathless, like the moment before a dam finally cracks. Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to call names. She didn't even need to defend herself. She just handed the truth over, quiet, clean, undeniable, and waited for the flood. The moderator opened the folder with the kind of hesitation normally reserved for ticking packages. Inside, neatly clipped together, was a stack of printed emails and memos, real ones, not anonymous screenshots, not out-of-context quotes, full headers, full timestamps, full names. Jasmine sat back in her chair, hands folded, watching it unfold like she had already seen this movie before. The moderator scanned the first page, then the second, his eyebrows pulling together tight. "This," Jasmine said evenly, speaking not to the moderator, but to the camera, "is a series of communications between senior members of a political action committee aligned with Ms. Bondi's interests." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even blink hard. In these documents, there are outlined strategies for using racially charged language, misinformation about voting practices, and targeted smearing of minority candidates across key districts. The moderator cleared his throat, glancing quickly at the producer offstage. But Jasmine wasn't done. She leaned in slightly, her tone never shifting from calm. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some intern gone rogue. This was deliberate, designed, funded, approved. She turned her head slightly, looking at Pam for the first time since she had dropped the folder. So, if we're going to talk about who built a career on creating chaos, maybe we should start with who paid for it. Pam stiffened but didn't speak. Not yet. The moderator moved to cut to commercial, his voice tight, but Jasmine lifted her hand lightly without looking away from Pam. "No need to rush," she said softly. "Let's make sure everyone sees it first." The papers lay between them like a live wire. No shouting, no drama, just a truth too heavy for the stage it had been dropped on. And for the first time since the cameras rolled, it wasn't Jasmine who looked cornered. It was Pam, and everyone could feel it. Pam laughed first, a short, sharp bark that sounded more like a glitch than a choice. "This is fake," she said, waving her hand at the documents like she could shoo them away. "This is absolute slander." Her voice, bright and sharp just moments ago, cracked at the edges. The moderator tried to ease the moment, suggesting they verify the documents during the break. But Pam wasn't listening. "This is doctored," she snapped, her words overlapping the moderator's. "You set this up. You think you can just smear me on national television?" She pointed at Jasmine, her hand trembling just slightly, not enough for the cameras to catch unless you were looking. Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even uncross her fingers. She sat there unbothered while Pam unraveled in real time. The producers in the control room scrambled, shouting into headsets, cutting to wide shots to soften the optics. It didn't work. Pam's voice kept climbing, wild and uneven. "This is entrapment," she shouted. "This is collusion." She turned to the moderator, then to the crew behind the cameras, looking for backup she wasn't going to get. The moderator mumbled something about a commercial break again, but Pam steamrolled right over him. "You're all in on it," she hissed. "This is a setup. This whole thing is a setup." Someone in the audience coughed awkwardly. A stagehand by the far wall looked down at the floor, pretending not to see. Jasmine stayed silent, the picture of control, while Pam crashed against the walls she had helped build. By the time the screen finally faded to black, cutting to a shaky, "Too late" commercial, the damage was done. Pam's meltdown wasn't a rumor or a headline. It was live, undeniable, replayable. And Jasmine? She hadn't had to raise her voice once. She let the truth work all by itself. When the commercial break hit, it didn't reset the room the way breaks usually do. No one laughed. No one made the usual small talk about coffee or lighting or traffic outside the studio. The energy had shifted hard, sliding from easy banter to something raw and uncomfortable. Panelists who had spent the first half of the show smiling politely now avoided eye contact altogether. Some shuffled their notes. Others fiddled with their mics like it might give them an excuse to look away. The moderator, usually so crisp and controlled, stumbled through the next few lines. His voice cracked once, barely noticeable, but enough that even the control room caught it. He kept glancing sideways at Pam, who sat rigid now, jaw tight, arms crossed so hard they looked like they might snap. He kept glancing at Jasmine too, but for a different reason, because she hadn't moved, not once. Jasmine sat the same way she had before the break, calm, balanced, hands lightly folded over one knee. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She let the air do the talking. She let the weight of what had been exposed fill every corner of the studio. You could feel it pressing against the walls, against the camera lenses, against the hearts of every person watching at home. No need for shouting. No need for more words. Jasmine had already said everything she needed to, and the silence that followed said even more. Somewhere backstage, a junior producer whispered into a headset, "We lost the room." They weren't wrong. The room wasn't just lost. It had been claimed slowly and deliberately by someone who understood that power doesn't always come from speaking louder. Sometimes it comes from speaking last and letting the truth echo all by itself. The first thing that leaked wasn't even the broadcast footage. It was the shaky, uncut handheld camera feed. Someone from the tech crew maybe, or a junior staffer who realized something historic had just happened and hit record. The clip hit Twitter before the first commercials even ended. It showed Pam Bondi yanking off her mic with a vicious snap, slamming her cue cards against the table, muttering under her breath as she paced tight circles behind the desk. "They set me up," she hissed, voice low but caught on every boom mic still live in the studio. "This always happens when you give them too much room. You let them talk too long, and they pull this crap." She threw her notes onto a chair with a loud smack, oblivious to the cameras still rolling quietly out of frame. It wasn't anger you could spin as righteous. It was rage, the kind that doesn't look good no matter how fast your PR team scrambles. Within 15 minutes, the first hashtags started trending. Pam snaps, Crockett receipts, live meltdown. Side-by-side clips flooded Instagram and TikTok, Jasmine sliding the folder across the desk with surgical calm, then Pam unraveling frame by frame. Twitter turned into a bonfire overnight. Some users clipped Jasmine's stillness with captions like, "This is what control looks like." Others remixed Pam's rants into memes, auto-tuning her muttered them into club beats by lunchtime. News outlets couldn't ignore it. Even conservative commentators who usually rallied around Pam hesitated, fumbling to explain away what the whole country had already seen. It wasn't just that Pam had lost her cool. It was how clearly it happened, and how clearly Jasmine had refused to lose hers. And while spin doctors worked overtime to salvage Pam's reputation, Jasmine didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The footage had already told the story. Jasmine didn't rush out of the studio after the panel ended. She waited, calmly, until the last camera light clicked off and the last producer stopped pretending everything was normal. Only then did she step into the small press alcove set up outside the green room, a few reporters, a cluster of handheld recorders, no big production. She didn't bring an entourage, no aides hovered nearby, no stack of prepared remarks. Just Jasmine Crockett, still steady, still unbothered, standing alone in front of a plain black backdrop. One of the reporters shouted the first question, "Congresswoman, do you have any comment on what just happened with Ms. Bondi?" Jasmine smiled lightly, the kind of smile that didn't beg for headlines. "You don't have to yell," she said simply, "when the truth is on your side." The room fell into a hush, waiting for her to go further, to twist the knife, to revel in the win that the whole country had just witnessed. But she didn't take the bait. "I came here to talk about issues that matter," she continued, voice low and even, "not to engage in personal attacks, not to get caught up in theater. The American people deserve better than that. They deserve leaders who can stay focused, even when the conversation gets uncomfortable." No blame, no gloating, no retread of what had just unfolded live. Jasmine wasn't there to relitigate Pam Bondi's meltdown. She was there to make it clear that the real story wasn't about volume, it was about truth, and who could hold on to it when the lights burned hottest. One more question was shouted out, something about whether she expected retaliation or backlash. Jasmine just shook her head. "Accountability isn't comfortable," she said, "but it's necessary." Then she turned, slow and deliberate, and walked away, leaving the microphones and the frenzy behind her. She didn't need to stay and soak it in. The work was already done. By the time Jasmine's shoes hit the sidewalk outside the studio, the clips were already everywhere. News outlets ran the footage in endless loops, some trying to analyze it frame by frame like it was a football replay. Conservative networks scrambled, trying to reframe the moment as a calculated ambush or a manipulated outburst. But the images told a different story, one they couldn't edit or explain away. Side-by-side photos flooded social media, Jasmine sitting still, serene, hands folded, while Pam flailed and shouted just feet away. Commentators called it a masterclass in restraint. Editorial headlines labeled it a pivotal cultural moment. Memes popped up almost instantly, Jasmine's calm face next to the words, "Hold your line," in bold black type. The story wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about a shouting match. It was about control, about how real power doesn't have to roar. It just has to refuse to shrink. In less than 24 hours, Jasmine Crockett's name trended on every platform, not as a firebrand or a troublemaker, but as something rarer, a force. Late-night hosts mentioned it in monologues, professors assigned it in media literacy classes, activists stitched it into TikToks about emotional intelligence and systemic bias. Even a few conservative voices quietly admitted what had happened. "Say what you want about her politics," one strategist muttered to a reporter off-record, but that woman just rewrote the playbook. Jasmine didn't flood the airwaves with interviews. She didn't drop merch or capitalize on the viral heat. She went back to her district, held a town hall, listened to her constituents, and kept doing the work. Because the moment wasn't the victory. The moment was just the proof that you don't have to fight dirty to win, that you don't have to outshout the chaos to outlast it, and that sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that simply refuses to break. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.